Markle.
I've had the best time in London. Fans are amazing.
And Sarah Ferguson. They broke onto the scene as monarchy modernizers.
They were going to change the spirit of the monarchy. They were going to make it unstuffy.
And they're perceived as perhaps doing a little bit too much and being too good at their jobs.
I don't think any of us had any idea that she would kind of end up exactly how Fergie has ended up.
Both dedicated to the Queen.
There was definitely some warmth and some bonding between Meghan and the Queen.
Fergie was an enthusiastic supporter of the monarchy.
They brought a different style to the institution.
Both Sarah and Meghan's personalities would have been a breath of fresh air to the royal family.
Women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice. They need to feel empowered to use it.
Those very same qualities of being strong, independent women seemed to be their downfall in the end.
Eventually attacked in the press.
This is name-calling. This is actually bullying.
In royal careers like no others, wherever Meghan went, Fergie had been there 3 decades earlier.
There's a common bond between Sarah and Meghan.
Will these trailblazing women ever return to the fold? Or have they outgrown the royal family forever?
They're not going to be taken down another royal path just because somebody told them that they need to do this, be this, and act like this. No way.
In March 2021, nearly a year since leaving the royal family, Meghan Markle shocked the world in a revelation-packed interview with Oprah Winfrey. Perhaps the least expected of her admissions was that Sarah Ferguson was a source of help just before her first meeting with the Queen.
Yeah, and Fergie ran out and she said, "Are you ready? Do you know how to curtsy?" I said, "Oh my goodness, you guys." And so I practiced really quickly and we went in and I met her and apparently I did a very deep curtsy.
Who better to put their arm around Meghan and say, listen, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm just like you. I know what it was like. Than Fergie.
I suppose among all the bombshells of the Oprah interview, the revelation of a closeness between Meghan and Fergie was one of the more surprising things to come out.
Today, the Duchesses live outside the royal family. Meghan performed her final duty as a royal in March 2020 and has not been in the UK since. She now lives in America with husband Prince Harry and their children. The Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, has been divorced from Prince Andrew for just over 25 years and survived a string of scandals since.
Fergie's older than Meghan and belongs to the 1990s era, really, of the British monarchy. Certainly, Fergie would have looked upon Meghan as a woman who was breaking the mould. I suppose this just draws into view the parallel between these two women, which in many ways couldn't appear more dissimilar.
At the time of the Oprah Winfrey interview, few people were aware of the closeness between Fergie and Meghan. But the two have so much in common. Unlike many who marry into the royal family, both women joined the institution with plenty of life experience behind them. In 1985, the 25-year-old Fergie was flat-sharing in Clapham, South London, when she started her relationship with the Queen's middle son, Prince Andrew.
She was living a relatively independent life. She'd had a job in public relations in London and went on to work in a publishing firm. So she did definitely bring a lot of experience, and certainly more than Diana, who was barely older than a teenager when she got married.
Her father, Major Ronald Ferguson, had been a high-ranking army officer and then polo manager to Prince Philip and Prince Charles.
She definitely had aristocratic ties. She'd been around Prince Andrew as a child at polo matches.
They were reacquainted as adults at Royal Ascot in 1985, and their relationship became public knowledge. They became engaged the following February.
Sarah Ferguson was off to work as normal this morning. although her day did start with a bouquet of flowers delivered to her flat before breakfast and rushed into her by a flatmate.
I remember Fergie's father famously saying, "My daughter's 26, of course she's got a past. It would be pretty odd if she didn't have a past."
Just like Fergie, Meghan Markle had lived a full life when she met Prince Harry. In 2013, she was visiting London to promote the TV series she starred in, Suits. One of Fergie's friends, Lizzie Cundy, a regular face on the capital's showbiz scene, befriended Meghan during this period.
We got on like a house on fire. Meghan has a great sense of fun. She loved London, she loved British men, she wanted a British boyfriend, and she wanted to work in London. I could help her get to the right places and meet the right people.
And how are you enjoying London life? I mean, it must be mad because, you know, it's very different here and it's cold.
It is very cold, but the people are so warm. As cheesy as that sounds, I was joking today, I've never been called love or darling more in my life, so it makes me want to stick around for a while.
3 years after this interview, Meghan would meet Prince Harry during another trip to London. When the relationship was announced, the public wanted to know every detail about the background of this 35-year-old American divorcee.
Although Fergie and Meghan are obviously coming from sort of two different upbringings in two different countries, there is a lot of similarities between the two of them.
They both aren't scared of hard work. They will go in and really go for it, but they also have their own opinions and will say what they feel and think.
The British public got their first glimpses of the real Fergie and Meghan when they were interviewed about their engagements.
If it's not possible to do it in July and August, then I think we will. Sorry, we. Got to get used to this we business.
I know, it's difficult, isn't it?
We, that's right.
Here was Fergie teasing her prince, was interjecting and very confident speaking to the interviewer.
I mean, one of the things that is still startling about it is, of course, she gave Andrew a kiss. And, I mean, and that just wasn't done.
Oh, you missed this!
In the same way that Fergie made a big impression when introduced to the British public, Meghan stole the show when her engagement to Prince Harry was announced in November 2017.
Very early on, when we realized we were going to commit to each other, that we knew we had to invest the time and the energy and whatever it took to make that happen. And so yes, with the filming schedule, it was not the easiest.
She was very, very confident, and not just confident of the relationship, but also in the way that I think she felt that what this marriage would be and how she could retain some sense of control over her destiny. I mean, I remember thinking, this is a woman with a plan.
What's been really exciting as we talk about the transition of this out of my career but into the role is that, as you said, the causes that have been very important to me, I can focus even more energy on.
It was clear both women were taking well to their new lives, but they still had to win over the royal family, especially the Queen. In Prince Andrew, Fergie was marrying the Queen's reportedly favourite son.
There was a very good warmth between the Queen and her daughter-in-law. Fergie was an enthusiastic supporter of the monarchy, if you like. She sort of threw herself headlong into learning everything that she could about what was expected of her.
The wipers on the bus go swish, swish, swish.
Similarly, nearly 5 years after she began dating Prince Harry, Meghan would reveal in her controversial, globally broadcast interview with Oprah Winfrey how warm her relationship with the Queen had been as she got to know the royal family.
We were in the car going between engagements, and she has a blanket that sits across her knees for warmth, and it was chilly, and she was like, "Meghan, come on," and put it over my knees as well.
With a blessing secured from the head of the family, both women married their princes on waves of national optimism. Fergie and Andrew's wedding in 1986 was attended by 2,000 guests, watched by 500 million worldwide, and tens of thousands outside Westminster Abbey.
And out into the sunshine they stepped to face those crowds for the first time as the Duke and Duchess of York.
I do remember watching that excitement with other people across the planet and being excited. I wanted to see what her dress looked like. I wanted to see what she would do with that beautiful fiery red hair.
Again, the crowd roared its request. What's that, said the couple, as if they didn't know. Of course they did. And this was what the crowd was waiting for.
In the same way that Fergie's nuptials brought a bit more sparkle than usual to a royal wedding, Meghan's looked like no other that had gone before.
It was a joyful union of different cultures and different continents. A love story Hollywood will no doubt try to recreate in future years.
I think there's every sign that the marriage of Harry and Meghan marked the beginning of something different, or at least Meghan wanted to curate things in her own way.
A transatlantic guest list that included George and Amal Clooney, David and Victoria Beckham, Oprah Winfrey, and Idris Elba.
For Meghan, being a woman of colour, having a gospel choir that were mostly black and then having a black minister as well, whilst, that might not seem political, and perhaps it shouldn't be seen as political, it absolutely was a political choice. And I think she was trying to send a very clear message that she wasn't going to be leaving behind who she was.
Perhaps the most unexpected guest at Meghan's wedding was Fergie herself.
I think it was surprising that Fergie was at the wedding of Harry and Meghan, because in many ways she was on the fringes now of the royal family.
There were also those reports that Prince Philip did not want Fergie at Harry and Meghan's wedding. And Harry, intervened and said, no, this is what I want, but also this is what my bride wants as well. She has bonded with Fergie and she wants her there.
Fergie may reportedly have felt the chill of the monarchy at Meghan's wedding, but her reception when first joining the royal family couldn't have been warmer.
I think a lot of the world forgets that for a while there, Fergie was wildly popular beyond Princess Di, so popular that Prince Charles even said at one point to Princess Diana, why can't you be a little bit more like her? She's so bubbly, she's so effervescent.
What's your name? Nice to see you. Did you have a lovely time?
She decided to fully embrace not just royal life, but the life of her husband too. Andrew was famously a helicopter pilot. Fergie decided she was going to learn to fly too.
So when he comes back in the evening and tells me what he's been doing, I now know what he's been doing.
Before long, Fergie's charms were being appreciated around the world. In 1987, she and Andrew took an official tour of Canada.
I remember covering it for my newspaper, and we travelled all over Canada, and they just about did everything, and that played terribly well with the public over there.
Wearing their cowboy hats, completely at ease. People just could not believe how much fun and energy this fiery redhead seemed to bring, and how different she was.
Just as Fergie's fresh energy revived the royal family's image in the 1980s, when Meghan took her first royal tour of Australia in 2018, her talent for connecting with the public proved invaluable.
They went down an absolute storm. She put people at ease. She could meet particularly young people. And in parts of the world, particularly Australia and New Zealand, where there has been a lot of flirting over the years with the idea of them becoming republics, she was a massive injection of support for the crown and for the monarchy's longevity.
Meghan had focused the world's gaze even closer on the British royal family, but could her popularity prove to be her undoing?
Harry later said he thinks on that tour that the attitude to Meghan changed in the palace because of the way that she managed to seemingly wow the public and potentially overshadow Prince Harry even.
For both Meghan and Fergie, the qualities that had made them initially so popular would soon be the very things that turned the opinions of not only the press and public, but the family they had married into.
The press has turned on her, the public has turned on her. This is name-calling. This is actually bullying.
Both Meghan Markle and Sarah Ferguson were hugely popular when they married into the royal family, adored both by the public and, it seemed, their new in-laws. But as both duchesses soon found out, royal life could be fickle. Fergie's initial burst of popularity lasted 2 years from her wedding to Prince Andrew. The press coverage took a negative turn in 1988 during a tour of America.
Up until this point, the media were kind of endeared to her, and the very qualities of independence, of outspokenness that were very enjoyed by the British press before were the reasons that they began to turn on her.
The first sort of hints really were the number of outfits she had on that trip to America. They were very lavish, clearly very expensive. People began to wonder, did we really need to have a royal duchess doing things on such a lavish scale? Was she really respecting the decorum of being a royal duchess, or was she playing to the gallery?
Love you! I'll see you later.
It was an amusing, off-the-cuff remark, but it got people thinking a bit more deeply about Fergie. Was it amusing, or was it slightly crass?
She famously wore a hat that actually just said LA on the back of it, which she thought was a fun shout out to where she was in California, and other people thought was just tacky.
Before long, it was open season on Fergie in the press.
They started nitpicking about her appearance. Fergie was unfortunately very criticised for perhaps her fluctuating weight.
Some of the headlines, some of the, Duchess of Pork, some of the nasty headlines, they're hurtful. She's only human, she's not a robot.
They also started saying that she was work shy, and she was referred to as her royal idleness, or Duchess Doolittle.
It's shocking. The press has turned on her, the public has turned on her. This is name-calling. This is actually bullying.
Meghan, too, would discover soon after joining the royal family that intense press attention was a double-edged sword.
Very, very tiny things about Meghan's appearance seemed to stir up huge reactions in the British press. There was the moment in 2018 at the British Fashion Awards where she had dark nail polish on.
There was pictures of her holding her bump, very proudly. But on the other hand, people were saying, well, why is she doing that? That's attention-seeking. Why does she have to do that in every picture? Look at me, look at my bump. But she was just being a mother, cradling her baby bump, She couldn't do anything right.
In the world, we all know that women are held to a different standard than men, and that's absolutely tenfold within the royal family. There are such limitations to what a woman can do.
You'll often hear people say, well, you're helping women find their voices. And I fundamentally disagree with that, because women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice, they need to feel empowered to use it, and people need to be encouraged to listen.
Meghan Markle, let's not forget, was already somebody who was very outspoken about causes that she cared about. When she was just a girl, she wrote to people in the government about feminism. She wrote to Hillary Clinton, and she continued that long beyond her girlhood.
The outspokenness that had made Meghan such a positive force in her acting career would be viewed differently within royal circles.
Stories began to emerge that she was not the easiest employer. She was clearly frustrated at times in her role. And I remember there was a headline in my own newspaper, was Meghan Duchess different or Duchess difficult?
For some royal watchers, the criticism of Meghan was not only ever present in the British media, it also had a disturbing tone.
I certainly think, with the coverage of Meghan, there were racial undertones from the beginning. There was, the now infamous Daily Mail story in 2016 describing her as being straight out of Compton, which of course has racial undertones.
With Meghan, that scrutiny against her as a woman has been even worse because she's a black woman, so her race is folded into it.
I felt when they first got engaged, I was quite worried for Meghan, knowing the extent of racism that can be displayed in the British press. I didn't see it ending well at all.
It soon emerged that Meghan's relationship with her sister-in-law, the Duchess of Cambridge, was not as cordial as it had initially appeared.
Stories about so-called rivalry with Kate began to emerge. The public began to sort of have questions about this, and the media too. I mean, what was the real dynamic? What was really going on in private? Were Kate and Meghan even friends? And the truth was they really had very little in common, except that they'd married two brothers.
And it's the press, headlines of, spat between the sister-in-laws, which starts to drive a different perception of Meghan.
One woman's downfall is another's rise to power. And soon, Meghan was compared unfavourably to Kate.
Whereas Kate used to be seen as really plain and boring, suddenly, actually, Kate is seen as very dutiful and very committed. And Meghan, in fact, is sort of seen as much more of a disruptor.
Story after story was very unfavourable to Meghan and very, very favourable to Kate. And this was constant. What she ate, what she did, what she demanded, all of that was being compared to perfect Kate. One example of this divergent narratives of Meghan and Kate. Kate eats avocado. It's seen as a kind of normal thing for relatively affluent middle-class people to do. Meghan eats avocado and it's seen to be an unethical practice.
Just as Kate and Meghan were compared, elevating one at the expense of the other, a similar phenomenon occurred in the 1980s and 90s, when the tabloids picked apart the differences between Fergie and Diana, even though the two women remain firm friends behind the scenes.
Fergie and Meghan are marked by the fact that they are going to always be compared to their sister-in-law. In Fergie's case, it's Diana.
All of a sudden, Diana became this English rose. She became, the princess that everybody wanted her to be. Fergie, on the other hand, was really cast aside. She is not suited to be a part of this perfect royal family.
Well, Sarah always said it was very tough being next to Diana because Princess Diana looked like, a supermodel, did it with such charm, such grace, could just waltz into a room. Whereas Sarah said I was a bit of a calamity, So it was tough because the press then compared them both.
Yet in the public eye, Fergie was seen not only as the bad Duchess in comparison to Diana, but also as a bad influence on her.
Perhaps one single issue encapsulates that more than anything. And it's the one I recall when they were both at Royal Ascot. I think it was in 1987. And they were hurrying through the royal enclosure. And Fergie and Diana were both photographed sort of poking an umbrella up the backside of a royal equerry.
Princess Diana and Fergie had this great sense of humour, a great relationship, always doing jokes, always doing pranks. But it was always kind of Sarah that got in trouble for doing them.
On a skiing holiday, Fergie and Diana were jostling one another and they almost fell over, and Charles looked very cross and told them to behave. And again, it was Fergie was the one who was seen as the sort of the instigator in all this. And so she was constantly and often unfairly cast as the bad Duchess to the good princess.
Meghan and Fergie's years within the royal family were bruising, but their troubles had barely begun. Because only once they left the firm would they feel the full fury of a press, public, and family scorned. Sarah, Duchess of York. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. United by their experience within the family firm and the harsh exposure it brings. Also by their love of doing things differently.
Fergie and Meghan Markle had moments that had people raising eyebrows and maybe thinking, these are not going to be like other princesses we know.
By mid-2019, life as a working member of the royal family, under constant scrutiny, was overwhelming Meghan. She was close to breaking point.
We see the initial steps of Megxit when Meghan and Harry broke away from one another within the royal foundation.
On tour in South Africa in 2019, she gave the biggest hint so far of her unhappiness during a TV interview. She was asked, how was she coping with the role?
I've said for a long time to H,
That's what I call them.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just survive something, right? Like, that's not the point of life. You've got to thrive. You've got to feel happy.
What she was saying is that she's finding it rather hard and no one really has helped her. And this immediately have sort of echoes for me of Diana all those years ago, complaining that she'd really not got the support and help that she'd had when she entered the royal family. And it was rather shocking.
By Christmas, some 18 months after marrying into the royal firm, clearly Meghan had had enough.
She did not feel protected. She felt attacked on a regular basis. It's no wonder that she wanted to escape that. Who wouldn't want to escape that?
They went to Canada for Christmas, so they didn't spend Christmas at Sandringham like they had done the year before.
And that seemed an extraordinary slight in many ways. I mean, the Queen, who dearly loves having all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren around her at Christmas, the suggestion was that perhaps Harry and Meghan were being selfish about all this.
What's more, after Christmas, they would never return to live in the UK. In contrast to press reports, this was far from being an impulsive act.
The structure of the royal households means you can't blindside the Queen with something like that. They didn't have agency over their own passports or driving licenses. So clearly it wasn't them, bolting and running away from the royal family.
They had long made it known they were not happy with the lifestyle. And Meghan wasn't the first woman in the royal family to feel this way. By the late 1980s, Fergie had also reached her limits.
Fergie found living at Buckingham Palace very restricting and almost claustrophobic. She felt that every time she would leave Buckingham Palace, she would have to tell somebody. It was like she was constantly being watched.
Sarah was finding it very difficult. She was very lonely. I mean, she virtually had hardly seen Andrew at all.
2 young children, her husband's absence in the Navy, and the lack of emotional support from the institution had all taken their toll.
She really had no one to turn to. Literally, if she spoke to a royal aide, it was like, shut up and get on with it.
And I think that was the point that she thought, I can't do this the rest of my life. I need to be supported by somebody, by my husband, and I'm not getting that.
Fergie was very low and began to seek out friendships and relationships.
The press's one-time love affair with Fergie was a distant memory when news of her relationship with Texan millionaire Steve Wyatt broke in early 1992.
Her relationship with Steve Wyatt obviously caused huge waves in the royal family, made her even more ostracised.
Weeks later, the daily newspapers splashed the shocking news that Fergie was to separate from her prince.
And sadly, we can see the snowball effect of where things really started to go wrong for Sarah.
She was now involved with a man called John Brown, who was euphemistically described as her financial advisor. There emerged the calamitous photographs of her in which she is kissing her toes or sucking her toes, as the papers had it.
The story caused sensational headlines across all the tabloid papers. Fergie was at Balmoral with the entire royal family when the story broke.
She couldn't hide from it. It was literally all over the tabloids. It made very uncomfortable breakfast reading for the Queen, and Philip, Margaret, and others found this so distasteful and, something that was really beyond the pale.
4 years after her separation from Andrew, in 1996, Fergie's divorce came through. She left the royals without her Royal Highness title.
The Queen decreed the royal titles for divorced royal women, which was the first time applied to Fergie and meant that after their divorce they would relinquish the HRH title.
For Meghan, it was hoped that the loss of her Royal Highness title could be avoided. After all, she was leaving with her husband.
They essentially wanted to be half in and half out with the royal family as far as their royal duties were concerned. They still wanted to do some work on behalf of the crown, but also be private citizens.
Unfortunately for Meghan, the Queen did not support this vision.
The Queen then had to put her foot down saying, well, if this is what you want, you then can't use the royal titles. And indeed, you have to pay back the money, the taxpayers' money, that is, for Frogmore Cottage, and you're not getting money for your security.
At the time, it was not yet clear how Meghan would tell her side of this story. But again, Fergie had already been there and done that. 25 years earlier, Fergie had taken the extraordinary step of telling all to Oprah Winfrey in an historic and intimate interview.
You were sitting in the palace and you felt a sense of hatred for yourself. That doesn't compute in our Princess Cinderella Duchess mind. You understand?
Okay, so
that is the fairy tale.
That is the fairy tale. But then comes the realism that you actually you didn't marry to get the fairy tale. You married a man. You fell in love and you married the man, and then you've got to come to terms with the fairy tale. Now, it's not a fairy tale. It's real life in there. Well, so to speak. They think it's real life in there.
Okay.
You know.
For Sarah Ferguson to go on an American TV chat show and spill the beans on the royal family, what life was like inside the palace, it was unheard of. It was explosive.
British public and the royal family in particular is much more reserved. You don't share your feelings, if you like. You don't share your hurt or your pain or any difficulty that you're going through. You just carry on, right?
She was honest about the affairs, or at least elements of the affairs that she had, and how badly they had gone down with the Queen. She didn't flinch from that, and that was very brave of her.
Once Meghan was also stripped of her title, she too decided to grant a tell-all, no-holds-barred interview to Oprah.
I think these interviews were a real moment of taking back control and reframing the narrative.
It's striking that it's to Oprah that, again, Meghan turns for her kind of first interview at length after leaving the royal family.
And her revelations to Oprah made for gripping television.
And yeah, and when you say, was it what it looked like, my understanding and my experience of the past 4 years is it's nothing like what it looks like.
And again, same story, if you like. There's no fairy tale. You know, I did not experience a fairy tale. In fact, I experienced something completely opposite. It affected my mental health. I had suicidal thoughts. I had to give up, in one sense, who I was as a person.
For Fergie, her American TV appearance was far from being the last time she courted controversy. 2010 saw the nadir of her relationship with the press, when grainy, secretly filmed footage revealed her selling access to Prince Andrew to an undercover journalist.
£500,000 when you can, to me, open doors.
With Prince Andrew?
Yeah.
Is that a deal?
Yeah.
The moment she got conned by the so-called fake sheikh, an undercover reporter for the now defunct News of the World newspaper, who tricked her into talking about Prince Andrew and offering, at least according to the newspaper, access.
It says a lot about how vulnerable a position she must have been in financially. To be offering something of that nature, knowing the risks associated, and also knowing the position that it might have put her daughters.
She said, Beatrice looked at her with those big eyes and said, Mummy, how can they do this to you? But sadly, Sarah had done this to herself.
With characteristic candour, once again, Fergie sought to rehabilitate her reputation with a jaw-dropping Oprah World exclusive.
I must have been a little bit worse for wear, and I think I just went, well, if you're going for 40, okay, well, if you want to do business in the future, then, to be honest with you, I can't even think where my head was.
Sarah, of course, goes on Oprah because that is your global platform. The royal family is global. In order to get your side of the story across, you need to go on with Oprah.
For both duchesses, who pulled back the curtain on the workings of the royal family, The Oprah Winfrey charm offensive only worked on one side of the Atlantic. In the years after her confessions, Fergie seemed to stay out of favour in the UK.
Fergie finds herself very much an outsider in British society and in British life. Her popularity has plummeted.
When Meghan left the royal family, she also faced a backlash, including the still unproven allegations that she had bullied palace staff.
She is opinionated. She is a workaholic. I suspect that she took all of that into the royal family and came across in a different way.
I heard a lot of people say maybe Meghan has either been holding Harry captive or maybe she's brainwashed him.
Both Sarah and Meghan have these dark clouds still hanging over them.
Despite allegations like those, which border on the ridiculous, Fergie and Meghan face a challenge to reinvent themselves or be forever marked as renegades. Fergie and Meghan, two women who had huge success when they first joined the royal family. But soon they found themselves leaving the family firm and heading towards public controversy.
Fergie ended up parting from her husband. Meghan ended up parting from the royal family. It had a profound effect. I mean, people were genuinely shocked.
And the royal family will never be the same.
But as the two women tried to move on with their lives, there was no denying their royal past.
And for Meghan, she's still married to a prince, you know? So it's almost, you can't escape it. Having that attached to you, you almost can't blame them then for using their titles, which they both still legally have. Obviously, that neither of them used HRH titles anymore. Both Meghan and Fergie are Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, or Sarah, Duchess of York.
The duchesses used their new stylings to make a difference, but their initiatives were disapproved of.
Just like Fergie, Meghan is in one sense doing the exact same thing. She's using her royal status as the Duchess of Sussex and cashing in on that.
But a lot of people look upon it and frown and say, well, are they taking advantage? Are they, using the royal name to benefit themselves?
Of course, commercially, it makes total sense for them to have those titles.
Both women look at opportunities to make a living, and America embraces them with open arms, just like the UK did in the early days.
Meghan, she and Harry want financial independence, but they are global figures, and they have a huge following and popularity, and America corporately is very keen to welcome them in.
I know in the UK it's different, particularly in the aristocracy. Being born into money is much more respectable than making your money. But here, We admire people who make their money.
There's been the establishment of Archwell Productions, which is the means by which Harry and Meghan can basically earn money.
Then went on to get, Netflix, Spotify. They're big money-making brand deals.
Once again, Fergie had blazed the trail for Meghan. Decades earlier, she had been in the States with an entrepreneurial mindset.
Fergie has been the blueprint, and she was the first to do it. She was the first to make a living outside of the royal family and to continue to do that, especially after the Queen very publicly said that she wouldn't take responsibility for Fergie's debts.
Fergie starred in a range of extraordinary adverts for cranberry juice.
Light Star gives me a real zing, especially when I serve it with ice. Cheers.
She was doing ads on cranberry juice, and she really landed a big deal with Weight Watchers. I mean, that paid her an extraordinary amount of money.
She did whatever she could do to earn a buck. Sarah really needed to work and earn money to survive.
She was very successful in America for quite a few years. I mean, she became dubbed the Duchess of New York rather than the Duchess of York.
Not only is America a place to make money, it's also a place where both women have been made to feel very welcome.
Meghan, of course, is American, and she does all of these things that might be considered too loud or too political in a lot of the UK and certainly in the royal family.
Fergie realises that she has the freedom in America to perhaps be herself, and especially by being self-deprecating, confessional, loving, unpretentious woman that initially had been so warmly welcomed by the public.
And it also showed their sort of more generous side in that they're prepared to give people a second chance.
And I think that's something that's similar for Meghan and Harry as a married couple. They've been welcomed in the States, they are very popular. They're very much seen as a part of, the Hollywood elite. They're praised for their charity work.
And they both went on to combine their new financial independence in the US with their good work. Fergie had charity Chances for Children, and Meghan the Archwell Foundation.
The work that is kind of accepted that royals do is showcase charitable causes and support philanthropic activities. It's entirely to be expected that they would try and still court public support by continuing to do philanthropic things.
And I think that a person can do both. A person can care about charity, but also make a living.
And something that neither of them can really be blamed for doing. And obviously, as a byproduct, it perhaps means there's a bit more interest in what they're doing.
Despite her best efforts for charitable causes, Fergie, for one, always seemed one step away from a scandal in the press. In 2011, she apologised for borrowing £15,000 from Jeffrey Epstein, who had by then been convicted of soliciting underage girls in 2008.
Her worst financial moment came when she was on the verge of bankruptcy and there had to be a complete restructuring of all her finances. She borrowed very heavily from Jeffrey Epstein.
Meanwhile, Prince Andrew's past friendship with Epstein remains deeply controversial.
Prince Andrew, are you an embarrassment, sir?
Sarah was there, and whatever you say about Sarah Ferguson, she's loyal.
But there is definitely a pattern to Fergie's post-separation life, a sort of scandal followed by recrimination, followed by confession, followed by attempt at rehabilitation. And that has happened on at least 2 occasions. And we're currently in a period of rehabilitation, I think.
Regardless, these two women are moving into the future and thriving once again. With new family members and new ways of paying their bills.
I think Fergie will continue to do what she's always done, which is be relatively effective at making money, probably reasonably effective at also spending it.
Sarah is one of life's survivors. You always see her with a smile, and as she said, as her father said, the show must always go on.
And as for Meghan, the future is full of possibility.
When it comes to her royal connections, I do think that already we're seeing that Meghan and Harry are almost bigger than the royal brand.
We obviously know she has the Archwell Foundation, and they're trying to do good work through that, but will she also eventually dip her toe into politics? Will she run for office at some point?
Will these duchesses, outsiders bonded by a curtsy to the Queen and royal lives full of similarities, ever want to return to the fold?
It's almost like the relationship between the Queen and Fergie has kind of come full circle, and the Queen has embraced her back.
Sarah was invited back to Balmoral in 2013 by the Queen. You know, the Queen's always been very, very fond of Sarah, and she's very fond of the girls as well.
It is very difficult to imagine Harry and Meghan being welcomed back into the royal family with open arms, but stranger things have happened.
We do have the Jubilee next year in 2022, and I think all eyes will be on that balcony to see if Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lily will be on that balcony.